The National Association of Realtors has agreed to pay $418 million in damages to settle class action antitrust lawsuits over broker commission.
Now, for anybody confused or just unaware of how significant this is, without exaggeration, this recent settlement is going to shake up the entire real estate industry, and it'll affect everybody from buyers to sellers to existing homeowners, and especially in this case, real estate agents.
The settlement now bans the NAR from making any set rules that would let a seller's agent compensate for a buyer's agent. The norm had been the 5 to 6% commissions, although the NAR said in a call today that they vehemently denied that there are any set commissions, saying they are always negotiable.
Agreement effectively will destroy the current home buying and selling business model in which seller pays both their broker and a buyer's broker.
Is this the end of buyer agency as we know it? NAR just settled a massive lawsuit, and the way agents get paid commissions is going to change.
On today's podcast, we're talking about changes in the real estate industry, NAR settlement, and how that affects real estate agents, home buyers, and home sellers. And today with me, I have Matt Silver, who is the president of Illinois Realtors Association. Thanks so much, Matt, for coming on today's podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here. Believe me.
And before we go into changes and talking about how that impacts businesses and sellers and buyers, I wanted to ask you this. How does one go from an agent to president of Illinois Realtors?
Well, that's a great question. It's been a 24-year ride, to say the least.
Since you became an agent?
So I was licensed way back in 1998, and I started my career in real estate as a commercial broker. Mm-hmm. So I had a license. Obviously, it was not a realtor yet, because, we've got the three-way agreement. But I was in commercial, and I worked for a great company, which I thought was a great company at the time. It was I got in at the bottom, so to speak. The bottom meaning they were just starting, so I could really sort of skyrocket. But there were some incredible names that were there. The guy who brokered the Bulls United Center Stadium, they used to work for Richie Stein, and they started this other company. It was called GVA Williams. Williams was out of New York. GVA was the worldwide banner, and actually by the time I was done doing all my cold calls and I'd get to GVA Williams, and this is the worldwide banner, and Williams out of New York, and they're representing people would hang up. They didn't care. It was like, oh.
So what year was it when you started? 90?
So that was 1998 when I passed the agent test way back when.
Cold calling only,
just doing, and which is funny because I said I don't want to be put in a room and just smile and dial, and that's exactly what I did. But I hustled. I was very hungry. I just met my fiance at the time, or was about to become my fiance, and then my wife. And so I was craving, business, and I would do anything to make it happen. And so I was working a lot of hours, and I loved that, but I work on integrity. And I found that, interestingly enough, a lot of the people in the commercial industry, I know, and this is a horrible generalization, but this is also 26 plus years ago, or 27 years ago, whenever 1998 was. It was just that everybody had a brother-in-law, and everybody had a cousin or an uncle or whatever, and they would come in and finish the deal, and so you'd get kicked to the side. And there was no method for compensation, which is kind of funny about how we're going to talk about what's coming up here. But I felt it lacked integrity, and that was it just didn't ever feel right. For 10 years prior to that, I'd worked with my dad in packaging sales, and for probably about 8.5 years before that, I was in the restaurant business, in the hospitality industry. I was a chef. I was front of the house guy. I managed restaurants. It was sort of my passion. I went to Michigan State, got my degree in hotel, restaurant, and institutional management, and I loved every aspect of that business, except I didn't sleep very much because it was about 20 hours a day at work and 4 hours off, and not a lot of time to sort of recuperate. And it was 6.5, sometimes 7 days a week for long periods. So kind of got out of that, went into the business with my dad, loved it, but I just could never crack 6 figures in income. And I constantly felt like I was being stifled, and I was a 1099 employee.
6 figures in 2000s? That was huge.
Yeah,
amount of money.
6 figures. Yeah, actually,
that was for a lot of money.
Well, I worked for it though, but I got close. I mean, I was like, high 80s to like mid 90s all the time in the packaging business. And I was doing probably about $2 million in sales, which doesn't sound like a lot in real estate now. But for that business, that would be like us doing, 50 million in sales, just to kind of give you an idea, obviously in numbers way back when. But, I worked as a 1099 employee there as an independent contractor and realized that I could sort of create, my own business. And so I always loved real estate. I loved what it brought to the table and what I sort of brought as a skill set, which is, as you'll see, the gift of gab, because I don't stop talking. But.
Yeah, you're like a people's person.
Yeah.
You want to be around people.
I do.
You get bored if there's not enough people around
Correct.
you. You need them to
and I like to
live.
create relationships. And so I tried to leverage, my sort of business skills that I learned in school and what I learned in the restaurant business, and then really just following my dad. Everything with him was a handshake, and everything was always delivered and paid for, and everybody loved him. He was the nicest guy I think I've ever met in my entire lifetime. And I say that because I got to know him on a whole different level. A lot of times, when you work with a family member, it's different, right? You get to see their other side, as opposed to how they, what their role is in the family. And my dad obviously was our father figure, but he always had a smile on his face. He treated everybody with respect. And, I've tried to run my business the same way. So I got into commercial real estate, loved it. Went on my honeymoon, came home, realized people from my company had gone through and sort of rated different deals and whatnot. And, and I wound up calling a lot of the people that I had, put months into creating, these deals to put together. And they were told that I had left the business. And so they wound up working with somebody else. And
unethical.
Terrible. And, I just went, oh God, this is not what I want to do. Cause I love to travel. And, I always try to take at least, 3 or 4 vacations a year, whether it's, for a weekend or a week or sometimes 2, to just clear my head. Americans, we work very, very hard, and we, for whatever reason, don't want to reward ourselves. It's very different in Europe, as I'm sure you know. And so I've just tried to blend a lot of what's going on and what my history was, and just bring it forth into this. And I got into residential real estate, and I've never looked back. So I've loved every waking second of it. I don't ever feel like I'm going to work, which is kind of a great feeling. So
Me too.
Right?
Me too. It's if you find what you love to do, you're around people. And like sometimes we were walking with kids yesterday with my wife. I'm like, I just went on inspection with my buyers. It went like this. And then I was with my buyers. We were having fun on the couch. Then we talking with the inspector, and then I'm just walking around, getting in a car, driving back. Like, where's work?
Right?
Where's work? I'm like, we work. There's a lot of other work that we do.
Absolutely.
We have to do.
There's 179 plus 105 things that we all do as realtors, depending on which side of the transaction.
But there's a lot of exciting things.
Yeah, there is.
As a managing broker, I'm slowly stepping away from production, but I'm coming back. I miss that moments of high. Like you get a contract. Yes. It's
Absolutely.
a contract. You don't get it as a manager broker. You don't get these moments. Agent joins, but it's like spread out in the process. You don't have these moments like accept it.
Right.
We're doing a deal actually.
That's right. Which I guess we need to disclose that, right?
Yeah, that's
which is how we met. And so that's
how we met.
That's our very good fortune, right?
Yeah. And then I saw that Matt Silver is the president on your email, and then I got an email from Illinois Realtors. It's got your picture in the bottom. I'm like, whoa, I'm doing a deal.
2 and 2 is 4.
Yeah, for sure. When did you start volunteering for the association?
It's funny. So I left, as I said, I left the commercial estate, got into residential, wound up working for phenomenal mentor, which I think we all need, by the way. But a guy named Jim Kinney, who was president of Rubloff Residential Properties. Mm-hmm. And Rubloff, interestingly enough, did, I think at one point they had close to 2 billion square feet of commercial properties around the country. They were the largest at the time.
They were bought by Berkshire, was it, right?
Well, yeah, Rubloff Residential, the residential part was sold to Prudential, and that's actually when I left, because I didn't want to work for corporate America again. So it was Prudential Rubloff, and then it became Koenig Rubloff, because they merged with Koenig and Stray, and then Berkshire came in and bought the Rubloff name and the Koenig name, and just made it, I think it was Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Koenig Rubloff.
Yeah.
And then they dropped the Koenig Rubloff.
I just remember when
Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Chicago. So
Yeah, I remember when I got into the business 2017, I remember Berkshire Hathaway, boom, 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 boom. I'm like,
and that was a long email address
So
to
much.
write.
so much
Exactly.
stuff in there.
Exactly. But I just, the funny thing is, when I first started, the big names obviously were Beard and Warner, who's still around, and they're a phenomenal company. Koenig and Stray, they owned a huge portion of the market, and Rubloff did as well. And Sudler, those are the companies that I interviewed with, on the residential side. And I thought they've been around, 60, 70 years plus. Beard and Warner, I think, was the oldest in the city, plus Caldwell Banker. And I thought, that landscape is really never going to change. And it's funny, I laugh to myself, just when you think to yourself everything is stable and steady and solid, there were the upstarts at properties, Mike and Thad, great dudes.
You know them personally?
They were selling when I was selling, and I used to see Mike Golden all the time at East Bank Club, where we were both working out. He was always like, "When are you leaving Rubloff? When are you going to come over? When are you going to come over?" And I'm like, I love Rubloff. There was just something about it. And I think part of it was there was just sort of this, a very connected and deep-rooted culture. And I think sort of around the country, I didn't have to bother explaining GVA Williams from New York, blah, blah, blah. And, the 25-minute explanation on who the company was. People just knew Rubloff. It was one of those names you couldn't buy the reputation that they had. They were phenomenal. And they were admittedly a little bit elitist about how they went about it, and I blew that up.
How many agents was it?
When I first started with Rubloff, there were 75 agents in the Gold Coast. They had just opened their Lincoln Park office. I think they had 50 to 75 there because that was a very fast growing at the time. And then during the first couple of years that I was with them, they opened the South Loop, because that's when the South Loop blew up, and everybody couldn't wait to get over there and start selling. In fact, I had put in a request to be a manager for the South Loop and for their what was it, Michigan City, or I can't remember the Michigan, New Buffalo, et cetera, et cetera.
Michigan City, Indiana, New Buffalo,
Correct.
Michigan. Yeah.
And so
all the way over there.
And they went with the owner's son. I don't know what he had that I didn't have, but maybe it was the same last name. But they chose Doug, and Doug's one of my dearest friends, and he's awesome. But I wound up sort of refocusing and re-energizing, and I just kind of banged it out. I was rookie of the year for them, and I fell in love with the business. But from a very early sort of, part of the career, I always felt like everybody needed representation, and I didn't care how much money you were spending. I just wanted to help you achieve the American dream and create generational wealth.
When you started, there was still no buyer agency.
Correct. Right? It was when I first started, way back when. It was still sub-agency, and during my first year and a half or 2.5 years into the business, that all switched into buyer's broker agency, and it was great. So Jim Kinney was my managing broker and is still a great friend and dear mentor. And he said, that you're about to enter and you're about to be really successful in a career that's going to give you a lot. And one of the things I expect from you is for you to give back. And he tapped me on the shoulder and sent me down to Peoria to go through the GRI program, which was a designation called the Graduate Realtor Institute. And so I took the class. I did the designation in a year and a half. I got my CRS. I took my CIPS. I held all these designations. It was great. And then somebody was supposed to, be on the GRI governor board, and for whatever reason, they got rid of him, and Jim tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "I'm really involved, and I want you, to volunteer here." And I did, and I got bit, and I've loved it ever since. So
what were your responsibilities?
So I was 8 years as a governor for the GRI program, where basically you help plan with the education director at Illinois Realtors, sort of the topics and, what people were going to learn, over the course of 8 weeks. You'd read announcements. You would just kind of keep everybody, on track. You'd try to recruit people to come into the program, which was really easy at the time, because even if you were a vet, and you've been in business for 10 or 15 years, our industry is so fast changing, and it always has been. Rules, laws, regulations, et cetera. Taking the GRI just to get the designation. I learned more and built an incredible foundation. And people who had been in the business who were like, oh, I don't really know how to do my taxes. Like, oh, you got to come to GRI, because there were 2 sessions on, what to do with your personal finances and how to manage that and, take care of stuff. And so that was pretty awesome. And then I went to REEF, which is the Real Estate Education Foundation for the Illinois Realtors, which is a very selfless volunteerism position, because you're basically choosing people who are looking for, for scholarships and whatnot. And so that was really selfless, so you'd read their applications, and there's 20, maybe 22 now, different types of scholarships. Jim Kinney actually has a scholarship, so it's for anybody who's a realtor or is connected to a realtor. So like my friend Ancha, who was president of the Chicago Association a couple of years ago, like her daughter applied, and she was, awarded $1,000, which is amazing, because Ancha's a realtor, so her daughter, got the benefit of it. So there's about 20 different scholarships. And because of Jim, when I was president of the Chicago Association back in 16, 17, when I was done, I really wanted to sort of create a legacy and to help people. And so I came up with the Matt Silver Advocacy Endeavor Scholarship. And that's for multicultural background of people who really want to be able to get to Washington, D.C., and to see sort of how the sausage is made. Because really, at the end of the day, the association business, at least for the Realtor Association, we're an advocacy engine. That's what we do, right? We advocate for private property rights to make sure that, we're protected, right? And our careers are protected. And so to be able to help and to facilitate and to jump into that stuff, I think I've sat on every committee at Illinois Realtors you can. But I did the state level first and then went back, into my local. So I'm all over the board, but yeah. I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
So for Illinois Realtors, you've been the president for how long?
So I was inaugurated on September 19th last year, and my term expires. It's a 1-year term. So you're treasurer for a year, then you're president-elect, then you're president, and then you're immediate past. So I'll be moving into immediate past president come this September. October 1st, technically. So
president of Illinois Realtors, you have huge responsibilities.
Yeah, for the most part, it's just making sure that you're the voice for all 52,000 members, right? I mean, we have, the state of Illinois has 86,000 licensees, and there are 52,000 of those are realtors. And
86 licensees, 52,000
correct.
Realtors.
And, the numbers are probably dropping a little bit, which I think we'll get into as well.
Sure.
But I think that's more of an inventory problem and not an association, black stain, bad
the amount of transactions last year went from 6 million to 4 million. Correct. So a lot of people didn't have anything to do. They couldn't sell. Now I have to pay dues. I'll put it on hold.
Correct. Yeah, and you can put your license into a holding company. Some people just choose to walk away. Yeah. They've done it for 35 plus years. I mean, I always laugh when we hear the average age is, 55 or 56 or whatever it is. I know it just elevated because it's an easy business to look at and say, oh, you got beautiful suits, you're driving a nice car.
Yeah.
People forget all of the things that go into being a realtor and what we have to do to get that deal across the finish line.
And
right?
also 87% of realtors don't even make it until in the first 5 years.
Correct.
The odds against you.
Correct.
Those who make it, there's a reason why they make it. And then they keep doubling. And then there's like 20% of realtors, real estate agents, I guess, in the whole country do 80% of deals.
Correct.
And it's true. You bump into each other all the time. Because
right.
Those who are selected, like few are doing most amount of deals.
Exactly.
Because they do what's important, but it's not for everybody.
And they're committed. And it's not an easy, the barrier to entry, we always laugh because I sat on a work group for this and we always laugh, we dropped the age to 18. A lot of people were really unhappy about it. Mm-hmm. But, when you look today, when you look back, there's a lot of people who are saddled, and I mean saddled with student loan debt, and they can't find a job. Mm-hmm. Right. And, college isn't for everybody. The trades, there's a lot of guys that I know who are phenomenal tradesmen who are earning amazing livings, who are incredibly important to what we do. And so to be able to drop the age down to 18 and to get people who needed an alternative to get into real estate, to work with a mentor, I mean,
I got a kid here, 20 years old. He's
probably killing it,
phenomenal.
right?
He's calling property owners that have 6-unit, 8-unit buildings. He's then calling neighbors and putting them together, closing deals. He does offices. Then he's reselling a huge 4 acres land. He's just calling, meeting neighbor, 20 years old.
And that's the perfect example of why we dropped the age, right?
Yeah, that's
I mean, they
good.
still have to work with a mentor, and they still need
Of course,
to have,
yeah, I have to
a
watch
couple
him.
years.
Yeah.
Because this is the most expensive, purchase anybody's going to make in their lifetime, right?
But he already signed up for CoStar, paying $500 a month.
There you go.
He's investing in it. Like, he's okay, I'm all in. And he came to me when he was just trying to pass the exam, and he's like, I feel this is mine. I can't take this exam is hard for me. It's my 7th try, but I'm gonna get it. I feel it's mine. He passed it. I'm like, I'm in my zone.
Right?
I feel it.
That's awesome. That's a success story that I'd love to promote. I love to hear that, and I hope I get to meet him before I leave here. So
yeah, maybe
Good.
he's here
or
every
I'll
day.
come back if I have to.
Yeah. Okay, so now switching gears a little bit. When did you first start noticing the lawsuit? You've heard about it. Did you know about it the first day? Because for me, it was last year, and I wasn't really taking that as serious as I should have, and probably most haven't. But until that went into a trial and then the settlement and all that, I'm like, okay. And then I went to managing broker classes, and Chris Reed, she's been talking about it all the time.
Chris is incredible.
So that's when I heard it a couple of years ago, and then she kept saying, this is important, there's a bunch of cases. When did you start noticing, watching it close and paying huge attention to it?
Rightly or wrongly, I've been following since it was announced.
Really?
Because it's
been a couple of years.
Illinois Realtors provides an Inman subscription, which everybody knows about. And we actually just added Housing Wire to everybody's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is, you have access to Housing Wire.
That's good.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm bad mouthing Inman. It's just he's not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of his story. I mean, it's like clickbait. So you read the headline and people can't wait to see it. And for the most part, his information is relatively accurate, I'll say. But I used to go to the conferences and I would sit there and think to myself, like, you are bashing us left and right in the National Association. And believe me, nobody's perfect. I totally understand that. But really what NAR, the National Association of Realtors, does, what Illinois Realtors does, and even our locals, I'm a member of the Chicago Association of Realtors. I don't know if you are.
Main Street. So
you're Main Street. So, our locals in Illinois are highly engaged. They're highly involved. Illinois Realtors, same deal. We have lots of people that we have helped, sort of climb the NAR ladder, so to speak, to get very involved on different committees and whatnot. It's unbelievably important for us to be at those tables, to be able to contribute to the conversations, to make sure that, what's happening in our local marketplaces is getting recognized, because what's happening here is probably going to wind up flowing down south towards Edwardsville or Collinsville or, take your pick, or into Kentucky. And what's happening down there is also going to flow upwards. And so we all kind of need to know about it and to be able to sort of prepare for it. So I've been very involved since my GRI days, which is, based on time. So many people listening are going to be so young. But that's really since 2002. I've tried to follow what's happening with our industry.
And what was your first reaction when you heard the verdict from the judge?
I was
before the settlement,
I was literally I was stupefied. I was absolutely shell shocked. Sometimes I think I'm still shell shocked because I know Katie Johnson. She's a brilliant lawyer from the National Association of Realtors. I know the 5 firms that they hired. They are also incredibly great at what they do. I think, the Department of Justice and, the jury and whatnot, I just think that there's a disconnect between what we do, how we explain what we do, and how it's being translated and digested from the other side. But you can't worry about that, right? Mm-hmm. I think people were very unhappy that NAR settled, but the way I look at it, because I try to turn everything, that might sort of appear as a negative into a positive. And I think in the long run, there's a few things. One is they settled for $418 million. Mm-hmm. It's payable over 4 years, and they are protecting, I think, just over 1 million Realtor members, from copycat lawsuits, being, sued individually, et cetera. And on top of it, the ones who are not, covered in that settlement, they'll be able to negotiate their own, like Anywhere. I work for, Corcoran Urban, and Corcoran is part of the Anywhere brand, which used to be Realogy. They settled early on. I know Redfin just settled.
I think they were the last ones.
Yeah, I think that you are correct. But, in the long run, $418 million is a lot of money. Let's, I'm not going to sneeze at it.
$1 billion. It's
but,
NAR 400.
Well, the settlement was $1.8 billion.
Yeah.
And because it's a class action suit, that trebles. So it would have been $5.4 billion that NAR would have had to have paid. And, the way I think NAR looked at it was, that's a lot of money. And that's possibility of bankruptcy for the organization.
I've heard that in order to appeal, you got to put 20% down bond or something.
Correct. And, there were a million different scenarios that could have sort of played out. And I think what NAR did was the right thing. They said, I mean, I know we don't like, the outcome, but in the long run, I don't think much is going to change, if that makes sense, because we're so vital to the transaction. And I don't want to seem delusional either, but $418 million to protect 1 million brokers from individual, bankruptcy and loss and, getting saddled down, with lawsuits is really a huge win for us. And it's a lot of money. Please, again, don't misunderstand. But at the same time, I think it was a fantastic outcome because it could have cost A, a lot more, and B, there could be a lot more lawsuits that are coming. And we don't need to feed the courts, right? In my opinion, my own sort of research into it, there were 8 jury members. The judge was a class action attorney. I don't want to make comment other than to say I was shocked about 2 weeks ago to learn that Minnesota has been working with exclusive buyer agreements for almost 30 years. Michigan, I believe, is 25 years. Indiana just got theirs baked into their state license, and we're baking it into ours. It'll start really as a professional courtesy for everybody in August in Illinois, and then the license law will change January 1st. So there's that, and which is great because we can look forward to that. And really what that does is it provides an incredible amount of transparency.
Yes.
And it's going to, I guess, really spur conversations where we're protecting the buyer.
Used to be that the buyers don't know how much real estate agent makes.
Correct.
Their realtor, who knows? I don't care.
And I feel lucky because I've always had this conversation, which is sort of what you and I were talking about before. I always sit down with my buyers to just explain the process. I do the same thing as a listing presentation. It's a very different presentation. Now it will cover a little bit more and it'll be a little more in depth. But at the same time, again, it's transparency for the buyer. They know how we are earning our living. They know how we're getting paid. They know that they're sort of on the hook and will have to cover this cost. My biggest concerns regarding moving forward, if things basically stay the same, are for the veterans, for the discriminated against, and the disenfranchised, because they're going to be put at a disadvantage because people are struggling right now, right, to meet their rent, to save money for down payments. And, this is another layer of burden on a buyer. And so, with that happening, I that's a concern for me. But we're a pretty resilient group as an industry, and we will figure out a way, and we lobby, constantly. And so, there's a few things. I was just in DC, talking with, my rep from Illinois' 10th district, Brad Schneider, talking to him. Actually, we just did the whole NAR Hill visits, and everybody who's an FPC, Federal Political Coordinator, we were all talking to our representatives and senators about capital. We were lobbying, for individuals, it's $250,000, and for a married couple, it's $500,000.
Yes.
So we're lobbying because that hasn't been indexed, and that was created in 1997. It was a beautiful gift back then, but the price of housing has so, rapidly increased that, for example, my mom is 91 years old. She lives in a house that she and my dad built 64 years ago, plus or minus. They paid $25,000 for it. It's now worth probably $450, maybe $500, maybe $600, you know, depending on, you know, conditions and what's going on in the marketplace. And, you know, she'll have a very hefty capital gains tax that you would have to pay. My father passed away 2 years ago. You basically have 2 years as a widow to sell the property if you want and not be subject to those capital gains. But she, you know, she's very comfortable in her house, and I want her to age gracefully there. You know, and she's not going anywhere, so she's going to be there for a while, you know, knock wood. And, you know, why should she, if she decided that she wanted to sell, why should she have to pay this massive tax? So we're trying to get that indexed, you know, to today's rates.
Makes sense.
The other thing, in Illinois, I just testified before the Federal Finance Committee, or the State Finance Review Committee, because we're trying to create savings account, you know, for buyers. So in essence, a buyer will be able to save money, you know, roughly $5,000 as an individual, $10,000 as a married couple, you know, to save like $25,000 to $50,000 for down payment, and they'll get the tax benefit of being able to save that. So it's waiting for a couple of tweaks, but I fully expect that that's going to pass, and that'll become, you know, a new law in Illinois that these are allowed, which will be great. So that'll incentivize people, because you and I know with the resale market, people are sitting on 2% and 3% mortgages. There's nowhere to go because we're in a woeful housing crisis. So where are they going to go? And we don't want them to leave the state, right? And then secondly, they're going to have, you know, a massive tax burden if indeed they are above this $250,000 and $500,000 threshold. So things to think about. But that's what I do. That's what I think about all the time, as you know, part of being president. And I don't get paid for that.
You truly giving back. To the
100%,
industry.
right? And, you know, but it helps me too, right? I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I contribute to RPAC, which is the Realtors Political Action Committee. And I do it because I know that it's important to be in the rooms and having those conversations with the state legislators and, you know, the federal folks, to be able to make sure that they understand what it is that we do. And I'll tell you that the highest compliment that I've ever received was from Brad Schneider, when he said one of the reasons he loves the Realtors, aside from the fact that his mom's a Realtor, one of the reasons he loves the Realtors is because the information we bring is accurate, it's timely, and it's truthful. And we look at intended consequences, we look at the unintended consequences, and we make sure that if there's something we haven't thought about, that it's digested and it's well thought out, and then we bring it to them to make sure that they understand really what it is and how it's going to affect society. We are a huge part of the GDP in America. We're 17%, right?
For sure. Like, everything is tied into real estate. Not everything, but a lot.
Pretty much.
A lot of contractors, lenders, a lot of things are tied into real estate.
I mean, on average,
this sector needs to be watched, and they know they needs to be watched.
Absolutely.
As soon as it slows down, interest rate needs to be coming down. You need to make it.
And frankly, we're in a normal, almost balanced market, right, at 7%. I mean, having the low rates that we had that was historical for as long as we did, 13 or 14 years. That's pretty incredible run. I don't know that we're going to jump back there, but even,
we'll see.
You know, to make it a little more affordable, even at, you know, 5.5% or 6%, it's an incredible investment, and it's an incredible vehicle to be able to create generational wealth. So
going back to changes. So what's changing now is this. The offer of compensation is gone from the multiple listing service. So we're no longer going to be able to see how much is the seller offering, and is the seller is offering anything to the buyer's agent. That goes away. Second is that we need to have...
Well, that only goes away from the multiple listing service.
Multiple listing service.
Correct.
Second is that we are going to have, as a buyer's agent, we need to have an agreement with our clients in order to start working with them. Does it have to be non-exclusive, or it has to be exclusive?
It can be either way.
Either way is fine.
Like, if I met you today and you called and you said, hey, I really want to see 123 Main Street, I would say, hey, that's great. Here's a form. I need you to sign the form. It just explains basically what my duties are to you. You know, today, before we walk into this particular address, if somebody wants to work on a longer term basis,
Yes.
and, you know, much like we do with listings, we want them to be exclusive. I think it's in the buyer's best interest to hire one person to, you know, really focus, because a lot of times, as we all know, if you hire many people, you know, who's watching and who's working for you. Right. So, and
those are the two changes that are happening.
Correct.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah, those are the two biggies.
So, in terms of buyer representation agreement, it's our consultation with buyer has to be longer and more in depth.
Correct.
Explaining how real estate agents make money, realtors make money, because maybe some buyers, and that's surprise. You'll be surprised maybe. Sometimes they might feel, because I've heard it recently, they feel like you get paid by showing houses. You don't explain how you work.
Right.
So we have to explain how we get paid. And right now it's like, I think everybody have heard about the changes. I get questions all the time. And it's not like it's our firm requests this. It's nationwide.
Right.
This is how it's going to be. And it's changing. We're all learning how it's going to be. But we just have to explain but I think, what are your thoughts? Like, if you just meet the client and then they call you and they want to see a house, or they come, hey, I need to find a house, I want to come to the office for a consultation, it's going to be hard to get that signature on that agreement.
I think it used to be hard to get the signature, because in the very, you know, different marketplaces that we have, you know, just locally with all the different cities, you know, my firm may have required that we did a buyer agreement, but maybe your firm didn't, right? I mean, I was referred, it's funny, I was having this conversation with my financial planner, who's amazing, and he referred a client to me. And I called and I responded super quick. And the guy sort of took his time getting back to me. And so I sent another email, and I finally heard through the financial advisor that he had gone, you know, he had chosen the other guy. No real reason, you know, why, frankly. I think maybe he thought, you know, the other guy was less aggressive, but, you know, for me, we're in a marketplace where response time matters. And so, you know, if I see something coming in, I try to get back to somebody pretty quick so that they keep coming back to me for the information. Because I know if I take my time and they're desperate, they're going to go find somebody else. But in this particular situation, you know, maybe he thought I was aggressive. That's fine. But he went to this other broker, and the other broker asked him to sign a buyer's broker agreement, and he refused. He was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go find somebody who doesn't make me sign this agreement.
But I think right now...
But that's going to change, because now everybody is going to have the buyer's broker agreement. And so people will know what is expected. There won't be that gray area of, you know, are you doing this for me? Are you not doing this for me? How are you going to help me? It's not so much about compensation, in my opinion. It really digs into what we owe our client, what our duties are to the client.
Yeah.
You know.
But the agreement has to have the commission fee set in there. It has to talk about how much the buyer's agent fee is.
Well, sort of.
Sort of?
Because here's the thing, and nothing's changed yet. I just want to make sure we keep talking about that. There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation. Nothing has been determined yet. But basically, what we are anticipating from these buyer-broker agreements is how we as a buyer's agent will be compensated. So yes, to your point, it will explain, A, how long is the agreement for?
Yeah.
Right?
Can you have it month to month? That's another question.
A lot of that is going to be based on everybody's individual company policy and what they decide. I know, for example, you know, my company policy for a listing agreement, we don't do 6 months anymore. You know, that all changed at COVID. We do 1-year listing agreements.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
That's my company policy, right? I talk to people. Is it negotiable? Of course it is. Everything has always been negotiable. And that's the other part of this that I think people forget, is commissions have always been negotiable, right? There is no collusion between you and I, you know.
But the buyers never really had any say on the buyer's agent commission.
No. Well, I mean, in the long run, no, they didn't. The buyers, the buyers typically, it's funny because that's so nuanced. There's 4 contracts in every deal, right? For the most part, or there should be anyway. There's the agreement between the seller and the seller's brokerage, right? Then there's an agreement between the seller's brokerage and their broker, right?
Right.
There's the agreement between the 2 parties, the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
And then there now will be an agreement between the buyer and the buyer's broker. So that's 4 different contracts, right?
And there's agreement between listing broker and the buyer's broker, which used to be in the MLS.
Correct. And so, the co-op compensation portion of all this, which, I don't admit to doing anything wrong, because my agreement when I'm listing a house, my agreement on my percentage was between me and my seller.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. They
And
agreed.
In essence, what I told them was that I'm going to offer a cooperative compensation of blank percent to bring in ready, willing, and able buyers, right? And what I loved about the MLS is that it was a trusted source. There were rules and regulations that were in place. I see this differently than the Department of Justice sees it. It was peace of mind to know that we were going to earn a commission.
And it was also
it's just going to be different now. And it was very transparent.
On all the websites.
Correct.
Everybody
and now
can
that's
see
going to be,
everything.
removed. And
it's
so
removed.
it'll be up to each individual company how they compensate,
Yeah.
or if they compensate. Because you don't have to, right?
What is your guess? How does the buyer's agent know? Is everybody going to be calling listing agents to find out is there offer compensation or no? Or is that not going to be a question? It's just going to be submitted along with the offer request.
I mean, it's funny because, again, lots of misinformation and disinformation. And I've already had, I don't know, probably 25, maybe 30 different conversations with people, because of the way they are now starting to advertise or to write into their listing agreement or their listing, well, I guess in the agent remarks, we'll just call it what it is, how they're going to, or if they're going to, or if they're not going to compensate. And, come August, you're not gonna be able to do that anymore. Right. So
August 17th is the date.
Correct. So do I think that there's going to be, I don't know, consternation? Yeah, I think people are, it's like anything else. When we were talking earlier about sub-agency and then having actual buyer agency, look how well we adapted.
I think the scariest
There's a lot
thing.
of gray area right now because we just don't know.
We just don't know yet.
But I think a lot of that is going to get answered. It's going to be a little messy. For the first, year. We're a little upended and whatnot. And just kind of going back to the original question that you asked me, was I shocked? I was very shocked. And mainly because I feel very ethical. I feel extremely proud of what I do and, how we work. I think what we do is noble and we help people, create generational wealth and achieve the American dream. And I get the chills still as I'm talking to you now. But that's why I love what I do. I don't look at myself as a used car salesman.
Yeah.
I mean, are there bad actors?
Because your job not is
Probably.
to get rid of the product. Your job is to create a relationship.
Correct.
Maybe not a job, but the goal is to create a relationship.
Are there bad actors? Yes, there are bad actors. There's bad actors, there's bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad everything,
Sure.
right?
Bad realtors too.
But and one of the things that I loved about, the way we were was that we were all held accountable. We've got a code of ethics that was written and, enforced in 1918.
Yeah.
Right. And anybody who's a realtor member, abides by the code.
Yeah.
And if they don't, it's up to another realtor to, sort of make it right. And I don't think that is going to change. There will be a few things from there, that'll be altered and different, but that's a living, breathing document as well. And, we've adapted, much like we added 10.5, Article 10-5, getting rid of hate speech and racial epithets and all that kind of stuff. And, people didn't like it, but at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. So what we're heading into is the right thing to do.
I'm from Ukraine. there's no MLS.
So are my grandparents.
There's no your grandparents from Ukraine.
Yeah.
Look at that.
See?
Wow.
I know.
What city?
Um,
Do you know which part at least?
I'd have to look at a map
Wow.
off the top of my head. Yeah, and I'll show you because I saw your picture over there. But
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
I'll show you.
I'm the first generation here.
Yeah?
Yeah. I came 15 years ago.
Yeah,
A
it's
couple weeks
amazing.
ago was 15 years.
To your point, the United States real estate market is the envy. Organized real estate is the envy of the world, and I think in the long run, we're in a gray area on a little bit of a bumpy road and whatnot, but we're going to be great. We're going to be even better than we've already been.
Yeah.
So
And what I was trying to say is that in Ukraine, we don't have MLSs, associations. We got no code of ethic. It's a Wild West.
yeah,
There's nobody, no jurisdiction or any entity to, help industry,
Sure.
like evolve and help them. Like you can take a client from each other. Nobody can do anything. I showed the property, but you received the check. Sorry. Here it's more regulated. It's
yeah, and I think part of what the Department of Justice is sort of being short-sighted with is our system is incredibly efficient.
mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of times when there's such massive efficiency, people think, oh, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Something is fishy.
Perfect.
Right? But it works. And the people who are involved in it, all 1.6 million of us or whatever the number is, 1.5, we all understand, right? It
was beautiful. It was beautiful. It's
only going to
easy.
get better. It really will. I promise you that.
That's good.
I promise you. I promise everybody who's listening and paying attention.
Yeah,
it will be better.
It's tough on the buyers that don't have much money for the down payment and now for the commission. I have a feeling that as there's going to be no MLS co-op on the MLS. We're not gonna know how much is a buyer cooperation commission. So I think that buyers agents are going to be explaining to their buyers, my opinion. This is my fee. This is the property price, and we discuss how much do you want to offer. And here's the addendum for compensation that the buyer will be signing to submit to the listing agent that goes to the seller to cover the fee, which is, I think that's how it's going to be. And then my opinion is that the sellers will look at the offers and the compensations that the buyers brokers request, and then they're going to just pick which one is the best in terms of everything. Financing, down payment, closing, co-op here, price there. This one is the best one. Let's do it. Even whatever the number there is for the co-op to the buyer broker, it still makes the most amount of sense. Do you see that?
It's entirely possible, right? I mean, again, that's the gray area. But here's the thing. Like, you and I have worked together.
Mm-hmm.
You know that I'm bringing I don't know what the right term is, well-established, well-represented clients to you. You know that I'm ethical. You know that I'm above board. You know that I'm not out there running around, wasting time with, people who are not qualified to be able to purchase. And so I think my relationship with you, if my offer is on the table and I'm asking, for compensation from the seller and our offer is good and qualified and healthy, I might have an edge because I have a relationship with you. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I don't know you, right, it's going to be incumbent upon me to make sure that I do create a relationship and that all of our ducks are in a row to make sure that our buyers are well spoken for and well represented and that we're advocating for them. However that's going to be.
A lot of buyers agents will be afraid of asking maybe for their fee, for the compensation. A lot of them also will be discounting because I'm broke. I need the sale.
Right.
I'll accept anything. Whatever.
We have that now. Do you know what I mean?
But it was easier. It was like, okay, it's there. So I'll if I have a transaction here, and I'm on the buyer side, this is how much I'm gonna make. But now
I
you
always
have
want
to
people to
explain.
take pride in who we are and what we do. And I think if you know your worth, I mean, this is what I say to all of the people who will listen to me. If you know your worth and you can communicate that to somebody, again, we're in a very noble profession. We help people achieve the American dream, which is the envy of the world, as we just talked about. Our system is incredible, and the system is going to get better. We're going to provide more information, more transparency. We're going to have, as you suggested, more in-depth and real honest conversations with our buyers, not just about how we get paid, because that's, I mean, for me, it's the last thing on my list, frankly. But it's, for me, number one, and what's most important is just making sure that you know what you can expect from me as your broker, right?
What's
how
my
I'm going to help you, what my value is, and how I'm going to get you through the transaction and through all the hurdles and through all of the legalese and all of the different processes. 179 if you're selling and 105 if you're a buyer.
105. That's the number of things that we as a buyer's agent.
That we do. Right.
Yes, and
that's pretty generalized, right?
A couple weeks ago on our Friday training, we do it every Friday trainings here. I pulled a list of 105 things that we do for our buyers, and we have it on our Google Drive for everybody. Just memorize them, Just memorize everything, because sometimes I know we all know this, but when you put on the spot, you might forget everything. I'm like, yeah, I'm valuable, but
Illinois Realtors has a slick sheet. You can pull it down.
Yeah, you have to remember everything you do. Sometimes you do things, but you don't realize you do them. So just now, because people will be asking now, You
remember when we went through getting our license and going through the classes and, trying to figure out, the one thing that always stood out to me from every individual instructor that I had was disclose, disclose, disclose.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. We just need to disclose, disclose, disclose all of our duties, all of our responsibilities. Yes. And in the long run, I mean, you can't go wrong having more in-depth conversation about it.
For sure.
Because then expectations are set. People know what they're looking for. It's going to be better.
Yeah, and I think we need to start now and not wait till August 17th.
Agreed.
Explain buyers, everything right now. Right now we're going through changes. It's a huge change in the industry.
It's a great time to practice, right?
Yeah, practice. Yeah, that's what every time we have a buyer, every time we have trainings on Fridays, I tell buyer, our agents, just explain them, this is what happening. This is we're learning along the way. This is what's going on. Just so they don't hear about it in front of the house that they now need to pay a commission. Like,
people need to make sure, and it's incumbent upon us as brokers and our designated managing brokers to be able to communicate the proper information. As I've said it 1,000 times, I know a lot today. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of disinformation. Yeah. You have to go to your trusted sources, right? I will tell you, shameless plug, Illinois Realtors is going to be putting on 5 to 7 sort of, I'll call them road shows with Betsy Urbance from our legal department at Illinois Realtors, where she will be discussing the path forward. Mm-hmm. It's open to any broker from any community. They're going to be in 5 different locations. First one will be down in Peoria. We've got one in Naperville coming up. We've got one in Schaumburg. So, people from Chicagoland will be able to go and attend. The only way to get in is you just got to register. Mm-hmm. But emails will start getting sent out. People can see it, and it'll be incredible. It'll be a 30-minute presentation and probably an hour plus, knowing Betsy, because she's incredible, and she wants to see us compete. She wants to see us be educated, and she wants to see us succeed, as we all do. So
you actually asked her good questions on a podcast. Today I opened up the email. How do you know when the buyer signs one agreement and then goes and signs with somebody else agreement too? How do you police this? It's going to be a little bit messy, probably.
It's going to be a little bit messy.
Because with listings, you can see it's published.
Correct.
That's it. This is a little bit, we'll have to learn the landscape, probably.
Yeah. But I think we're all going to probably get burned on one deal.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way.
Yeah.
And we'll have to chalk it up as a lesson. And then we're just going to have to sort of, tighten or strengthen or focus or just do a better job of making sure, and asking the right questions. It's always about asking the right questions, right? So,
well, for the buyers that don't have money for the down payments, I'm like, it has to be, somehow it has to work.
Well, Fannie and Freddie, I think because I think you and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago. Fannie Fannie and Freddie are now allowing like 2 to 9% in concessions,
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
which is terrific.
Yeah.
That doesn't,
That
help
helps.
if the seller's not willing to give the concession, right?
If they're not willing.
But it used to be a max of 3%.
Yeah.
It's funny because one of my favorite Chase lenders, a lady named Joni Park, she invited me, to talk with her team. And one of her members asked me a great question. And that was, so what do we do on pre-qualification letters?
Right.
Say
What number do
somebody's
we put?
doing an FHA and they are only doing 3% down, and they're going to look at a house where the seller is not, offering any compensation. Do we then have to get a 3% down plus 2, 3, 5, 10 X apples,
Credit.
Beanie Babies, whatever it is, do they have to get approved? And I couldn't answer the question, not because I don't want to, but I just think that's one of those scenarios that just hasn't played out yet. So stay tuned for that because we'll figure out how to do that, right?
Any agreements are coming out? Our contract is changing. Illinois. Oh no, you in Chicago. You're using the 4-page.
Chicago,
We here using
Chicago has
13-page.
their own Chicago Association Realtor contract,
I mean, what about
the multi-board contract.
the compensation? We're sending out a compensation addendum. I think it's Main Street form.
Yeah, Main Street has one. Knowing the fine folks at Chicago, they are probably working on something, and Illinois is probably looking into it as well. So, as soon as any of these forms, and all of this sort of comes into play, I promise we'll notify everybody.
But exclusive buyers representation agreement, we have a 4-page one. Is it getting changed?
It'll probably just be tweaked and updated to make sure, that it's within the confines of the judgment and the
Right.
ruling, which is
A lot of things are
again,
still pending.
correct.
We're trying to figure out how
Exactly.
this is gonna
So,
work.
and that's sort of one of the things, as we're sitting here talking today,
Yeah.
NAR, and the group, they've reached an agreement, they've settled, but it still has to be signed off by the judge.
Yeah.
And then, the Department of Justice is a whole nother animal, right?
They
and
want
possibly
to
the
decouple
FTC.
commission. They want to decouple.
And then the Fed, right? So there's still some heavy stuff to deal with, but I think in the long run, we'll just keep taking bites of the apple and we'll just keep adapting.
I think the biggest threat to the industry was internet. I cannot imagine myself probably back in the days using the book, and now it goes all on the internet. I think back then when you were a real estate agent, you probably felt like that's it.
Yeah, but think about that, right? Like that was a huge. That was a seismic shift going from published books,
I think
which
this
were
is nothing.
this thick,
Yeah.
right, to constantly scrolling through, and by the time you'd get there, property was sold, maybe it was under contract, because that was the speed of information back then,
I
right?
just felt like this is the value proposition. We got access to the book.
Yeah.
But now everybody's going to get access to listings through, websites.
They have it now.
They don't need agents, but they still need
But they do need the agent.
Yeah. Even
we
the
bring
sellers
the
that-
human factor. We bring the human
logic.
Logic,
I think it's a
exactly.
logic. Sometimes I've been in deals that will never happen without me or another realtor in the deal.
Couldn't agree more.
Because there's a lot like, oh, I'm pissed that they're asking for painting my stairs.
Right.
Like, no big deal.
Right.
There's the buyers. They're trying to, they're doing what they need to do. Don't take it too serious. Reasonable request. Okay. Let's do it.
AI is going to shift our industry as well. Do you use AI?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For listing descriptions.
Yeah.
A little bit
But
there.
there's so much that that's there, right? That's a whole nother topic, and we can come back, or I can get you in touch with somebody
It can
who
do a
can
lot
talk
of
about
stuff. Yeah, and it's improving.
It's
and
incredible.
Improving. We do AI. I'm sure Carlos does AI for editing a little bit. That helps with editing.
Sure.
We do when we do content through phone. AI knows which pieces to cut out and make
Right.
a video look better. Captions on a video.
But
it
we
does
all still look
automatically.
at it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people are funny. Carrie Little just did a session down in Collinsville, shameless plug for our spring conference that was, a couple weeks ago. But she did a phenomenal session because people are like, oh my God, AI, it's so new. But when you think about it, you know, you've been talking in your car, you know, hey, so-and-so dial blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's AI.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. Yeah.
I mean,
it's just going to be on steroids.
same thing with Matt. Yeah, it's exactly.
It's going to be, hey, Siri, can you order my toothpaste because I'm out?
Right.
And then,
But you do that now. I mean, it's funny. Like, do you have Alexa?
I don't.
So I have an Alexa, right? I've had it. I'd probably going on 8 years already. All my lights are controlled by Alexa. And it's funny because now in the morning, which is always a little unnerving still, but I'm always like, hey, Alexa, what's the temperature outside? Good morning, Matt. I hope you have a great day. And I'm always like, oh my God. Like, but you know, the more we talk to it and the more it learns, the more, the smarter it gets, right? So, you know, it's going to be pretty interesting.
For sure. Changes are inevitable, and we're going to be adapting.
We will indeed. And we'll be better, more transparent, more ethical, more adaptive.
Do you still do a lot of deals?
I do.
Yeah?
I still do. I mean, this is the lifeblood of who I am. I love being in the trenches and working every day.
You're more listing heavy or more buy heavy? Or you're
currently more listing heavy, but that's, I mean, I've got enough people that I could say, hey, let's, you know, start looking to buy. But there's just, you know, for that like 300 to 600 range, there's just not a lot on the market. And I don't ever want to put my clients into multi-offer situations ever. You know, and it's not just about price, but usually most people are filled with greed, I think. You know, when you're selling, you want to get as much as you can. I don't blame them. But I want to keep my buyers diligent. And so, you know, I probably win 60 or 65% of my multi-offers, which is good. And it's, for the most part, never about price. It's usually about my relationship, you know, with the other broker or, you know, the other terms that are on the contract and whatnot.
And then sometimes, like I'm telling you, if I'm on the listing side, a lot of times I want to hear from the buyer's agent that confidence in the buyer, your relationship with the buyer, how the buyer feels about it. Talk to me, sell it to me, you know. But a lot of them just sends an offer. That's a training thing.
I agree.
And for those who like submitting offer and then I don't want to bother a listing agent too much and I don't want to kind of sell and annoy, but they want to hear it a lot of times.
There's a lot of people in our business who are order takers, unfortunately, to your point. And I think that's just a lack of confidence that they have themselves, which I think any great managing broker is going to, you know, empower them to sort of be better and do better. Because once we know that, then we will, right? Once we know better, we do better. But I think at the same time, it's just, you know, I mean, look, I'm 26 years in, right? And I feel great about who I am and my reputation in the industry, you know, how I handle my clients, how I represent them, how I advocate for them. If I could ever tell anybody who's just starting in the business, that's what I would tell them. Be confident in yourselves. Just because you are new to this industry, you've had life experiences that you can rely on, right? So count on those to build your confidence and, you know, the trust in yourself. And, you know, it's everybody sort of takes their lumps, right? I mean, you're not going to win every single deal.
Yeah, never.
It's just not possible.
You could be competing against the guy who lost 5 offers and he's notorious.
Correct.
You know, you don't need to win this house.
Right.
Yeah, because you're not going to win it anyway. So you're going to, and at the end, usually the one your clients as a buyers get is the best one.
Always.
For them.
Always.
I don't know how it works, but for
it's fate, right?
Yes. Yeah. We lost it. Yeah, and then they feel like, oh my God.
It happens constantly.
I really wanted
agree.
This one. And then I tell them, don't get discouraged. Trust me, at the end, you're going to have the best one. And I don't know, all the time it's been like that. I was always buyer heavy. I haven't been in the business for too long. It's been since 2017.
It's 7 years. It's a good run.
7 years.
As we talked about, most people, you know, 1 to 3, they have a hard time. They kind of fall out of the industry. You know, I think you get past that 3-year mark and your chances are better. But, you know, even going up to 5 years, it's a hard business, right?
Yeah, but I've been growing. It was tough first year, and then I was growing, doubling, and then I need help. I got agents who to help me.
And we
kind of ended up at COVID. But after COVID, the first couple months was tough, and then I think it just took off from there. And it's just been
So I have a question for you.
Let's go.
When do we get? Let's go. I love that. When do we get you involved on a volunteer basis, either at Main Street or Chicago?
I can
or
try.
the state.
I can try. I love helping
Yeah,
agents.
you've got a passion, right?
I love helping. I can talk nonstop about finding clients and serving clients. I think I've listened to all the podcasts on my phone. I've been.
What are your top three?
Real Estate Rockstars,
Mm-hmm.
GSD Mode I've been listening to, and Ricky Caruth was the guy that I've been listening to a lot.
Awesome.
But Real Estate Rockstars has 1,000 or 1,100 podcasts.
Yeah.
I probably listened to 500, probably. I was just the first year was nonstop in my car, nonstop. And I can talk about all the lead sources, all lead gen strategies. I've tried them all, Facebook leads. I know how to run all them. I know all these things, I've tried it all. And cold calling, all the scripts, I've tried it all as well. I love, training our agents. And this room we built, not just for myself, but I give it to them for free. Carlos here, Tuesdays, Fridays. So I'm like, hey, guys, coming in. So we had a couple agents come in, do some podcasts. And then we put it for, on social. And then now they have some content.
See?
Now it's all about branding,
Right.
Social media.
Everything.
You've been doing content too. I'm sure for Illinois Realtors.
Sure.
You have to do.
You have to.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course,
in my
first time you
company,
do
I
it-
do a lot with Corcoran Urban, just, because they're kind and they let me speak every once in a while. We have a whole program called Tips from the Top to just kind of help.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you hear, again, I'm 26 years in, but we've got agents who are 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and to hear their
Sponges.
tips, right? They're sponges, exactly. And to hear what they've learned in such a very short period of time, it a great refresher for a vet like myself.
But I think like social media boosted things, with social media.
Yeah.
Once you start posting, and right now the 20-year-olds that they live with it, they grew up on it, so they're easier to take and use it.
Absolutely.
I think that speeds up the process if you're gonna do it.
Absolutely.
I don't know how you were able to sell in 80s or 90s. You got to drive with a pen, sign here,
You
sign
had a
there.
fax.
Fax. Right now, everything electronic.
And you couldn't even read the contract,
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
now-
But you know what? We adapted, right?
Right.
I mean, I'll never forget. I got married. My father-in-law said to me, "Are you worried about, the internet taking over your job?" And I said, "Not at all." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because for me, there's so much information out there, so much information. And some of it's great, and some of it's obviously, as you've heard me say, ill-advised, or, it's misinformed, or it's just bad. And that's another role that we've taken on, is like, how do we cut through all of that noise to get to the truth and to make sure that people understand what our role is and how we're going to do it and make it better."
Final question for you. How did you end up at Corcoran?
How did I have a Corcoran?
Didn't she sell the company?
So
When was
funny.
it? When was it, by the way?
I believe she sold about, it's like 10 or 11 years ago.
But I love Barbara. She's so great.
She's incredible.
I watch
She's-
her Shark Tank things. She's so super smart.
She works in New York. They have no MLS,
Right. I know.
as you know. And from what I have read and understood, she used to run around to the local offices, and she would bring brochures and books and, printed materials to help more people see what she had available
Uh-huh.
and offer a level of compensation, right? And I think anybody who's willing to share information and understands, sort of how to do that, you can only be more successable, right? The more eyes, I mean, that's kind of what it's, cast a wide net, right?
How many offices they have over here?
There's just the one. So right about 5 days before COVID, my two business partners had spoken with, I think at the time it was Realogy, with the Realogy group about, bringing Corcoran as an affiliate into the Chicago market, and lots of hoops and lots of, expectations had to be met, and they put a great deal together. And so now we're an affiliate with, we're the second affiliate announced in the network, and, it's been fantastic.
When she sold, with the name kept?
Yeah, they kept the name. So the lady who
Nationwide
runs
right
it now is, the president, CEO is a lady by the name of Pam Liebman, and she's phenomenal. I think she actually worked on Barbara's team, so she was pretty familiar. And I think there were a number of folks who stuck around who understood, sort of their core values and what was really important, and that's just been kind of spread. So
Can you
it's
hook
been
me
great.
up with Barbara to do a podcast?
Well, she's not involved anymore, but I'll send her a text if you want.
Oh, you have her text?
No, but we're connected on Instagram, so
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Matt,
pretty
thanks
amazing.
so much for coming out.
anytime.
Amazing.
And if it's okay with you, I promise you I will come back if you'll have me,
Let's go.
and we can talk about
After
things have started to settle
Yes.
down and whatnot.
Yeah,
Just make sure everybody's getting the right information.
for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Matt. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next one.